There are two possibilities for how we can work within the psychological sphere, or how we can operate within it. One possibility is the subtle way, and the other possibility, obviously enough, is the unsubtle way. And we can explain this a bit better by saying that the unsubtle way, the totally unsubtle way, is the way that's provided by thought. So if thinking is our basis, we can forget about any sort of subtlety. We can have sophistication and complication and layer upon layer of convoluted reasoning, but we can't have any subtlety. And we can show that or explain that easily enough. We could say it's like going down a road, and then there's a fork in the road. And so one fork is where we are calling upon thought to help us, to provide us with a way of looking at things, to provide us with boundaries, demarcations, a framework that can help us evaluate what's going on. So we've got all that stuff to help us when we go down the route of thinking about whatever it is, our problems, life, whatever. And the other road is where we don't call on thought. This is all very fine as a nice visual picture, but as far as we're concerned in everyday life, there's only the one road. It's like a big dual carriageway, and there are no forks, it's just thought all the way. And that's because thought doesn't allow us to know that there is another possibility. The possibility for some way of operating without thought, without the need for thought, is itself not part of thought's repertoire, understandably enough. So I was saying that this is particularly with reference to the psychological sphere. And within the psychological sphere, it is really helpful to be subtle. Because if we're not subtle, we're like a bull in a china shop. An enraged, bad-tempered, dyspraxic bull in a very cluttered china shop. And there's no way for us to be otherwise, really, because we're kind of blinded or blinkered by thought. And so we think we're doing one thing, but we're doing another thing at the same time. So we're always incurring side effects. We're always incurring unwanted consequences. Thought's always going to be like this because thought is always blinkered. Therefore, it sees a particular thing it can do and it thinks, good, I can change this. But it doesn't see that in doing that, it's bringing about another outcome at the same time, which contradicts the first. So an example, a nice simple example of why thought is unsubtle and why thought doesn't help us can be provided by something like OCD. So one way of looking at OCD is to say that something becomes an issue and we can't make it not be an issue, so we're stuck contending with this issue and doing whatever it is that the issue requires us to do. And this isn't a once-off thing, because once we go down the road of taking seriously things that didn't used to be an issue but which are an issue now, that isn't the end of it, because that tendency is like a ball rolling downhill. More issues will crop up that we also need to take seriously. And the fact of us taking them seriously gives the invite for yet more issues. Now, actually, I could be talking about anxiety. It's the same principle with anxiety, but we'll carry on with OCD just for a minute. So in OCD, something pops up that doesn't need to pop up. And it's an issue that doesn't need to be an issue. And so that's kind of irritating and annoying. And puts the demand on us time-wise and effort-wise and stress-wise. So the issue requires me to enact various procedures or protocols. Whatever they are, it doesn't matter what they are. When a certain thing becomes an issue in OCD, then I have to act in a certain way to counterbalance the issue, to make everything be okay if I can, to neutralize the perceived danger that's there if I ignore the issue or try to ignore the issue. So as an OCD sufferer, I can see very clearly that it's not really important, or it's not really an issue. It doesn't have to be an issue, but my mind has made it into an issue for reasons best known to itself. I can see that. But I can't fight against it. I still have to do what it wants at the end of the day, because it exerts huge pressure on me, massive pressure on me. Now, if we approach this in an unsubtle way, which actually is what we always do, we'd say, okay, there's a thing here that's an issue, and it shouldn't be an issue, and it doesn't have to be an issue. So let's talk it down. Let's make it less of an issue. Let's rationalize it, put it in its right context, put it in perspective. That's the unsubtle approach. The problem with that is that as soon as an issue pops into existence, any thought we have about it at all, any response that we have towards it, amplifies the issue. It makes it more of an issue. So every time, absolutely every time, without any exception, we invite thought to the table and say, come on, thought, do something to help us here. I've got a problem here. Every time we invite thought to the table, it makes the issue bigger. It never makes the issue less of an issue. Thought can't do that. That's the one thing thought can't do. So there's various things, various reactions, various thoughts we could have. So thought could come to the table and start wringing its hands and saying, oh, this is dreadful, what are we good at, this is terrible. Just one possible thought. And that, of course, sends a message that, yes, this is a real issue, and it's a very bad issue. And so clearly, that type of thought exacerbates the issue. But the other type of thought, where we try to make it less of an issue, also makes it more of an issue. So if we bring thought to the table and he starts going on about how it's not really an issue, it's not really important, it's only this, it's only that. And if you do this thing, which is a thing that thought has created, a protocol, then that'll de-escalate it. It'll make it less of an issue. So that we can think of that as being the apparently more helpful or sophisticated approach of thought, to argue the issue away. But the flaw there is very clear, because if thought is there trying to argue the issue away and getting pretty serious about it, like looking you in the eye and getting serious, okay, we're going to have to do something about this. So if thought is getting serious about the issue, telling us how to get rid of it, that means it really is an issue, because otherwise why would thought be standing there pontificating and taking everything so seriously? Anything that thought takes seriously is an issue. And in a crude way, not a therapy way, but a crude way that we'd all fall into, we can just say, it's not an issue. It's the same thing as thought trying to de-issue something. It's not an issue. It's kind of like a teenage thing saying, well, I don't care. As if we can deliberately not care as a type of an attitude. I'm going to have the attitude of not caring. I don't care at all. I don't give a damn. But the very fact that I've gone to the trouble of cultivating this attitude or generating this attitude means that I do care. Because if I really didn't care, and this is an old example, but it's a good one, it's still a good one. If I really didn't care, I wouldn't bother having an attitude at all. I wouldn't get an attitude. An attitude always covers up the fact that I care. So if there is an issue, my natural response is to go against it and deny it and say, no, it's not an issue. I don't have to do what this issue says. But that too feeds into it. So every single manifestation of thought, whatever thoughts come, whatever trick of thought that we employ across the board, they all make the issue more of an issue. So that's a long-winded way of saying that thought's useless. Actually, it's not useless. It's useless, but it's also worse than useless. It's problem generating. It's OCD generating. It's anxiogenic. It's anxiety generating. I have a lot of other things as well. So if it was only useless, that wouldn't be a problem. But it's actually a liability. So we see that very clearly in this case. In the case we're talking about, which is OCD, but it could be lots of any other neurotic manifestation. We can say, yep, thought's useless, don't invite him, because he's just going to confuse things and make matters worse. So when we get to, talk about this, we just won't invite thought. We won't bring him to the table at all. And that would be a good thing. It would be a great thing. Interfering, little busybody that thought is. It'll fix it, it'll know all that thought is. What a pain in the arse thought is. And that's all very well. So that's like going down the road that leads away from thought, the fork in the road where we go off and we do it without thought's help. No thank you, thoughts. I'll do this without you this time. And that's all very well, but we have absolutely no way of disengaging with thought. We have absolutely no way of switching that off, of coming to a problem, whatever that problem is, or maybe it isn't a problem, but it's something. We have no way of coming to that something without also bringing thought with us, which is an extraordinary thing to think about. Sorry, if you think about it, then you bring a thought in a second time. It's an extraordinary thing to be aware of. It's the classic example of having only one tool in your toolbox, like Maslow says. If your only tool is a hammer, you have to belt everything in sight as if it's a nail. Whether it's a nail, whatever the hell it is, you still have to belt it because all you got is a hammer. So it's an example of that. That's our one tool. Like we might talk of having all these strategies and techniques and whatever, but that just boils down to one thing. It just boils down to thought. All strategies come from thought. All approaches, all management techniques, whatever the hell, it's all thought. So just simplify it down and we'll just say that's thought. And thought is the person we don't want to invite. We don't want it there at the table. But we're stumped because we've got nothing else. That's all we've ever used. That's the only tool I have, and it's the only tool I've ever used, and it's the only tool I think I need. So now to discover that the tool is actually not a tool, in the sense that it's a helpful tool, but that it's something that turns against me, that banjaxes me pretty thoroughly. So this is the whole thing of seeing through thought, but then not knowing what to do. Like it's easy enough to say what it's like when there is no thought there, because something happens and I see it happening, I witness it happening, I'm aware of it happening, and that's fine, but I don't think about it, I don't judge it or label it. So that's what it would be if there was no thought there, if Mr. Busybody Thought wasn't there, micromanaging everything inside. Krishnamurti says that the highest form of intelligence is to be aware of something without at the same time evaluating it or judging it. Just to be aware of it without that judgment going, instantaneously clicking. Otherwise, if the awareness simultaneously happens with a judgment, for one, it isn't awareness. And for two, it isn't really intelligence at all. It's a kind of distorted form of intelligence. A form of intelligence that is enthralled to the completely false and misrepresentative impression we have of things, which is what all judgments are. Because judgments never go deep, they just go a certain degree, or not really any degree at all. They just touch off it and then click, there's the judgment. And then we proceed on that basis. So there's no going deep with judgments. In order to go deep, we have to not judge, and we don't know how to do that because we don't have the negative capacity, the negative capability. Because we never thought it was important. We probably never heard of it, never came across it. It was not part of our so-called education. But it is an extraordinary thing to be aware of this fact that we don't be aware of the world. We simply judge it. In other words, everything we come across, we judge automatically. And it's not us doing it. It's this thing in our head that clicks in and tells us what to believe it is. It's extraneous. It's an interloper. It's a foreign installation. It's something else in our head judging the world for us. Thank you very much, thing, for judging the world for me. It's a great help. So thanks for that. If we could see it, if we could see this kind of adjunct, this thing stuck to us that won't even let us have a single perception without judging it instantaneously and saying, oh, that's a that and that's a this. We'd go crazy. To see this thing doing that would be so infuriating, unbearably infuriating. It's like having a super dumb friend who always has to come out with his dumb opinions under every circumstance, despite the fact that he is dumb, and which means that his opinions aren't worth anything. They're a pain in the ass to listen to, and if you actually listened to him or took any notice and actually did what the advice implies you should do, you'd be in terrible trouble. So that's what thought's like. It's the very dumb friend you can't get rid of, who isn't really a friend at all. But for some reason we tolerate thought, or more than tolerate, we actually still think thought is a good help to us, a good friend of us. So the key to everything, and there's nothing complicated here at all, it's just this simple matter of being aware of something without instantaneously judging it. Everything comes down to that. Because if we do judge it, we make it more of an issue. Because if we judged it, there must be something there to judge. So we get trapped in our own judgments, trapped in our own constructs. It's the story of our lives, really, getting trapped in our own constructs because we can't stop thinking. So then we could say, okay, that is simple. Seems simple. How do I do that? How do I be aware of stuff and not have that instantaneous judgment snapping in or clicking in? So that's a very good example of what I've been talking about for the last 20 minutes or so, or whatever, which is that anything we try to do to fix it, or any thought-based approach, makes it worse. So as soon as I have this thought about what can I do to stop the judging reaction straight away, that thought just makes it worse. Because I'm calling into thought to tell me how to deal with thought. So I'm saying, thought, come and help me deal with this pain in the ass problem that's been caused by thought. So I'm getting Count Dracula in to run the blood bank, to put it allegorically, if that is an allegory. And so no, don't do that. That's not a good thing. Think about it. Or, okay, I shouldn't say think about it. I keep putting my foot in that one. Stop thinking, and then it might come to you that putting Vlad the Impaler or Count Dracula in charge of the National Blood Bank. Not so smart after all. Not entirely smart. Putting thought in charge of how to work with OCD, not a smart thing. Hey, yeah, what else can we do though? So that is what we do. But there is nevertheless a way to work with this infuriating, irritating, appalling propensity of thought to think everything for us before we know what it is and tell us what things are before we know what they are, and then cause us to be trapped in those constructs. And what we do, even though it's not doing in the sense of a purposeful doing, but the way is just to see ourselves when we are aware of something, and also see the judgment clicking in. So something happens, I'm aware of that, and another thing happens at the same time as I am being aware of it, and that's the judgment clicking in. So I'm aware of the thing happening, and I'm aware of my judgment. It's just a thing happening, so this is neutral. It's not like, oh, a bad thing has happened that I have to correct. It's just another thing. So life is full of things happening. There's no right and wrong. There's no good or bad. When we're talking about reality itself, what's actually real at this point in time, I can say it shouldn't be, but that doesn't make any difference. The only course of action, or the only course open to us with integrity, is to see it for what it is and not waste our time saying it should or it shouldn't or any of that kind of stuff. So what I'm saying is that thought isn't a bad thing. It's just another thing. So we see it. And when we see the judgment coming at the same time as the awareness, because we're seeing it and we're just noticing this happen because it's a thing that happens, it's just another thing that happens, and a phenomenon that happens, we're not making an issue of it, which we would be if we wanted to change it, of course. So we're not making an issue of it. And therefore, we have another way of looking at things, which isn't the reactive way or the mind-created way. We have a way that can actually be aware of the thought-created way of responding. And if we can see the thought-created way of responding, then we're actually not trapped in it. And so we're operating in a way that doesn't involve thinking. We've actually found a degree of freedom from thinking. Okay, thanks for watching.